welcome to Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out on WZZR, coming to you from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. That's right, Revolution Radio. It's home to fresh, unadulterated ideas and conversations in the chat room, and a place to get your merch. You should really do that. The chat room is brimming with attendees, so why don't you go and have a look. This is show number 477, 770 and 400. It's insane. I know, right?
Crowd goes wild. Catch
us on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app. Application for those of us born before 1960 to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed 2 hours of the show, don't worry. It's okay, because you can go ahead and spend $5 a month and subscribe to the Freedom Slips archives. Today, she had a great guest by the name of John Colbert, and they were talking about Mars. In fact, Dave, that's a topic we have to do very soon.
Yeah, it is.
Mars is a fascinating planet. Yeah, so, look, you missed it. That's okay. Go to the archives. Listen to it again. As many times as you want, in fact. And all of the shows from all of the hosts here at Freedom Slips. Okay, so
there's
just
no limit when you subscribe.
No limit, none, zero. I think it's fantastic. Okay, now, before we get into the meat of it, and we are still talking about biological weapons today, we're going to have a news hour first, and then we're changing streams to our second show, which will be continuing the show cycle, like I said, biological weapons. We're going to look at the history of it, and we're going to have a bit of a wrap-up as well. Just, what does it all mean, and where do we go from here? Well, hopefully,
who knows?
Hopefully we will go somewhere. But before we do that, we here at the Shiny Side Out would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the dark and young people. For Dave, that's right, and for me, it is.
In Pebble Way, it is the. Hang on.
Ooh, I mixed it up for Dave.
Yeah, wait a minute. It's the Daruk people.
Thank you very much. And we like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Sorry, I did mix it up there. I caught him flat-footed. that's okay. This is live.
And that's Mickey, and I'm Dave.
That's correct. And it is live. It is live. If you're listening to us in the archives or on YouTube, it's not. So
that's true.
But if you are listening live, look, if you are listening live, please do come into the chat. We do read it as we go through it. We will respond to questions. We will respond to comments. We will respond to criticism. Okay, we will. It's just more fun that way. It's an interactive medium, and we really enjoy the back and forth. It's really for us. I find it interesting. Anyway, Dave.
Yes.
Tell me, my friend, how has your week been?
Actually, I'll start with the somber news. My last living relative above me in the tree passed away, and there's a funeral coming Tuesday. Now, when I say auntie, it sounds a bit distant, but she was my neighbour. So the sisters lived next door to each other, and of course my mother and her sister, next neighbours. Isn't it good? 22 years. My cousins were like my, brother and sister that I didn't have. So we were kind of close. Our family was close like that. The rest of the family who weren't so close seemed much further distant in relation than that. So yeah, a bit sad. I woke up every time someone passes away during the night, Mickey. I'm woken up to them saying, "David," and I woke up to her saying, "David," and I go, "Uh-oh," and then I just waited for the call. Sure enough, about half an hour later, the call comes through, and there you go. So when one of my school friends passed away, he made his own go-kart and tried to test it, and he found a place where he could tested large concrete apron around an industrial area that was had no gates, and he was fanging it, which means going fast, for those who are unaware of the kind of terminology. And a forklift tine split his head open. So,
oh my God!
At that very moment, at the very moment that happened, he visited everybody that he knew. And I went, wow, Steve, wow. I experienced all these memories of him suddenly, completely out of the blue. And they were all pleasant memories. Each one of them were oh, good on you. Geez, I know I can't call him now, because he just passed away, and it kind of happens. And if you're open to it, if you're aware of this stuff going on in your life, you know, if you weren't told that that's silly thinking, silly talk when you're a kid by your parents, which Mickey and I have spoken about quite a lot, that's something that can happen. You can actually realize that's the thing. It's sort of similar to all the other effects that we have that are paranormal, when you and your friend were just about to ring each other, and then one of you called first, and you answer the phone and you go, oh, I was just thinking of you.
But it never rang, right? That happened to me a number of times.
Yeah, because you pick the phone up at the very second that they're calling you.
Yeah, no, that happened to me a number of times. We were spoken about this as well. My mom is I guess, but affected by that is the wrong word. But she experiences these kinds of things a lot. There was a gentleman which she used to work with, and then she saw him in where she lived in a suburb. Like, oh, that's really odd. But he just looked at her, and then he just disappeared. Right? She looked away, and then the next moment he was gone. But
yeah.
What she found out, he had committed suicide just prior to that.
Oh, wow.
Just prior to her seeing him in there. Yeah, and then look, there are other things as well. There was a dark figure with white rings around their eyes in her room, and she said she was afraid to go to sleep for a week.
Can't sleep, clan'll eat me. Yeah.
Well, essentially, it's the way she describes this entity looked a lot like a No Name from Spirited Away, in many ways, right? Look, I think a lot of the animists and especially Japanese folklorists, they're onto something when they're building these little shrines, and even in the visualization of some of these things. I think a lot of people are getting pretty close as to what it actually looks like. But Dave is 100% correct. Because when what he just said it's a very interesting turn of phrase. He said paranormal, or out of the ordinary, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is this: all of our experiences in life make up our life. They make up nature. So everything you experience is by definition normal. It's only our overlaid filters that make us call it something else. So as you walk through life and you have got no preconceived ideas, no filters given to you, you weren't indoctrinated from an early age, none of that, right? And you walk through life and stuff happens, then that's just stuff that happens. It's just your life. You accept it. I mean, you might see a UFO, or you might see an ectoplasmic form, maybe, let's say call it a ghost. You might see that, or you might see a Bigfoot, or you might see, Loch Ness monster, whatever it is. But these are the things that you see. But in your frame of reference, they're not extraordinary. They're just things that happen. Right?
That's right.
Whereas for us, the vast majority of us anyway, these things are extraordinary because we were taught, and this is to Dave's point, that they're not normal. They're not normal. This is normal. So, and you know what's funny, Dave?
What's that?
Our definition of normal has become narrower and narrower. I'll give you a simple example. About 100 years ago, you could go into a chemist, I think it was called an apothecary at the time, and you could order a gallon or 4 liters, 5 liters, 10 liters of gasoline, right? So they had their benzene, right? Benzene. Mm-hmm. You could in the same shop, in the same basket, if you will, you could have your daily helping of cocaine
and heroin.
Heroin, absolutely, and you have that together with an ice cream sundae. Thank you very much. Because But the thing is this, right?
And there was no "would you like that to go?" There wasn't any of that.
No, and the truth is that you probably you might have been carrying a gun, or you might have put your gun in a rack somewhere, or whatever the case may have been, right? But back in those days, I'm not saying those were ideal times. Don't get me wrong. There's no penicillin, no indoor plumbing, no one. It's not really the height of luxury. However, people, for the most part, not everybody, but people for the most part acted as though they were adults, and people respected each other. And okay, look, and that was a large part due to the fact that people were still afraid of God. They were God-fearing people. So most of the behaviors that were considered, undesirable were kept in check simply because there was a fear of God. That sort of has waned. Yeah. Yeah.
My rose-colored glasses also suggest, Mickey, that it was the community that people lived in, where everybody knew each other.
Exactly.
That's 100%.
That's exactly the next.
Was it? I'm sorry.
The point is no. But you're 100% correct. And this is really the important thing. Is so look, Dave and I, we didn't rehearse any of this. It's just us
That's
talking.
An exhibit of what that means.
Yeah, and because it was a community, because people lived with each other. If you wanted to have cocaine for breakfast, knock yourself out. That's up to you. It was reasonably priced. So you could have it for, do you get what I'm saying here? You didn't have to commit a crime to get it, and you weren't committing a crime by getting it. Okay? So there's a lot to be said for treating people like adults, and then
like
they might
ecstasy
respond.
Also in the 70s.
Sure,
it
MDMA.
Was prescribable.
Well, in fact, it was developed, if memory serves correct, for World War One to ease with the passing of the soldiers. They gave them MDMA because
a comical side effect was weight loss.
Yeah, that's right. But the point is that we are no longer living in that world, because everybody's a winner, everybody gets a trophy, everybody's mollycoddled. That's a nice Australian term.
Yep.
We're cuddling.
I like mollycoddled.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We are smothering people to the point that they no longer can think for themselves. They have to be told what to do, right? And it's really quite distressing. It really is. I mean, if you have to be told, we're putting barriers everywhere, and, fences, and if you have to be told not to walk through traffic or not walk off a cliff, well, maybe you should. I mean,
yeah, we're actually breeding lemmings now, right?
Yeah.
So the rant that is in Absolutely Fabulous, the English comedy show, that the main character, I won't bother describing anything else, the main character says in the witness stand, in her own defense, she gets annoyed at this changing society, Meckie, of breeding stupid people. She said, when you come out of the shopping centre with a shopping cart, there's now a fence, so you can't just wander onto the road. Right? This is in her own defense in court. It's hilarious. What a scene. But it strikes me, Meckie, that's truly what is happening. Remember, the more you helicopter parent your child and you make all of the decisions for them, they don't get to learn the right and wrong decision. So when you're left to your own devices like we were, I'd play outside all day until, what was the signal I had to look out for so I knew when to come home? When the street lights came on. That was when to come home. And we didn't have mobile phones. There was no communicating with anybody, right? Just, Mum, I'm going outside. I'll be home for dinner.
That's it.
We didn't carry bottles of water with us or anything. Not like today. I'm going to go out for 1 minute. I need my bottle of water.
Take your trail pack.
Quick.
What?
I live in bushland, and my daughter, to go on a bushwalk sensibly, carries a walkie-talkie. Well, it's not a walkie-talkie. It's a handheld CB radio now with 88 channels on it, right? But she'll have a backpack with snacks, water. She'll have, I don't know, things of interest that she'd like to take with her. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I ran out the door. I was lucky to have pants on. Not even a t-shirt in the middle of summer, right? They might have been swimsuit pants, right?
Yeah.
But and no t-shirt, no sunscreen, nothing, just out all day, came back. That was it, right? Back before the street lights went on.
Well, that's the thing, though, right? And it was okay.
But I learned that the thing was, I learned from making all the wrong decisions and learning what was the right decision to make in all of the play that we had. And now there's none of that.
Now, believe it or not, there's actually a book written about this, and a person, an English person, that had spent quite a bit of time in Germany, compared Anglo-Saxon upbringing with German upbringing, and Germans still bring their children up the way Dave has just described, for the most part, right? Whereas, of course, in most Anglo-Saxon or English-speaking countries, you have the helicopter parenting, and I don't know why that is. I guess it's this whole thing about fear. We've made people so afraid that they no longer can function properly and have to, again, mollycoddle is the word, their children. Whereas in Germany, after 2 world wars, the depression, the Nazi regime, the rebuilding after everything was bombed into the Stone Age, we know fear. We've seen. Thank you very much. Okay, we don't need to be told, because I remember in Germany. And I came here to Australia 30 years ago, right? So this was the late 80s. Early 90s when I came to Australia, but there was no culture of fear that was produced through the media. Sensationalism, sure, don't get me wrong, and yes, if it bleeds, it leads, all that stuff, but there was no fear seeding. There was no fear seeding. It was a really, in contrast to America, Australia, and I guess England to some extent, it was quite a different kind of cultural upbringing. But there was a lot of guilt, don't get me wrong. Guilt we got in spades for the Holocaust and so forth, don't get me wrong, definitely, right? And I went to, I think as part of the school curriculum, we visited 2 or 3 concentration camps as excursion tours when we were in high school, right? That was what we did. But there was no fear, because, I mean, in most of Europe, continental Europe, has seen fear. I mean, even Great Britain has seen real fear. There was never a war in the continental U.S. apart from, I guess, the Civil War, or really the War of Independence, but no real war anyone invading, or I mean, not to the extent that World War I and World War II played out. And similarly in Australia and other places like that. Whereas, it's not harder to do that kind of thing in Germany, especially after the events of World War II, because we experienced what happens if you give into the fear, if you give into the propaganda, which is what's happening today, Dave. That's what's happening. We are.
It's astounding, isn't it?
It is, though. It is. I completely agree. Right?
That people they've turned their sensibility filter off and just simply absorb like a sponge everything that is told to them as the truth, as if it were the truth.
Yes.
And there's a big difference.
Yes. And look, we'll get to that in our wrap up. Just imagine all of the news is being read to you by a used car salesman. Yeah. But that's where we are. That's exactly.
That's what's going on. That's right.
And look, and there's a lot more to say about this. Our diet, our education system, what's happened, and it'll actually be part of the wrap up.
Yeah.
When we
500th show.
Well, no. Tonight after the definitely 500th show, but tonight after when we wrap up biological weapons and where it's all going next.
Yeah.
And the world we live in, we'll definitely have a wrap up there. But yeah, show number 500, which is rapidly stampeding towards us. It's galloping.
Galloping.
That should be something. Maybe we'll do it a bit longer. Like I think actually we should, Dave. I think we should have.
We'll organise a 3-hour, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Maybe 4. We'll definitely talk to.
There you go, Chair Bear, who's he's in the chat room. Yeah, we're going to slice 2 hours off your show and go long. All right.
Yeah. Not quite. Not quite yet. But look, the thing is this, right? If we're looking at the world today, it's really worrying me a lot, because we went through this globally back in 1918, right? 1919, 1920, the Spanish flu. You look at pictures from that period, people were wearing masks, right? Because it was a thing to do. I mean, there was no talk about, fear-mongering per se. Now, it was a disease which was killing millions of people, so let's do something about it, right? Nobody was protesting against wearing masks. Now, you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. But I believe very firmly, and that's why we have done this show cycle here, that this thing, right, SARS-CoV-2, is a thing. It's mutating, and it's not an accident. That's the whole point of the show cycle we shared with you. And we'll get to where we are right now with the vaccines and all that. But this is a pandemic. This is a planned outbreak. And I'm saying this because if you follow the trail of breadcrumbs, or bodies in this case, from 2000 until now, including test cases, like planning scenario war plague games, if you will, which happened. They happened in Wuhan, in fact.
Did you know? I've got to say something here, Ricky, just to join it up, right? Before we start talking about the actual virus, details have come out that in Wuhan itself, the 2 weeks before the Chinese government decided to announce that there was human-to-human transmission of the virus, they'd already acknowledged to the Wuhan lab success at the commencement of a vaccine for this current virus.
Say again?
2 weeks before the announcement by the Chinese government that the virus was human-to-human transmissible, they were acknowledging successfully to the lab the commencement of the vaccine creation.
Wow.
They were making a vaccine 2 weeks before the government admitted that you could transmit it between people. Still, this was still letting people leave the country, only using temperature control, checkpoints, forward temperature measurements, which means if you're asymptomatic, you were free to travel. So there's something, I have to say that's quite bad. And also the gain of function that went from the US. We know all the rest of that, but I wanted to bring that one out straight away. Now, I've got to say, Mickey, I'm going to share my middle screen, which is the current virus detail of confirmed tested cases only, not all those ones in the communities that are untested. And one of the things that I've noticed is the trail off. We had a couple of exponential places around the world, and now it's basically purely just India is exponential. All the others are starting to taper off, but it looks like India's numbers. When you've got to consider this, looking at the 400 and whatever it is, 10,000 new cases is basically just the limit of their ability to test people. Not that they actually had that many people contract the virus in that week or on those days, right? It's just their ability to test, which I think these numbers show. Other countries like the US, they're down to 50,000 people wandering into test facilities or and being admitted to hospitals. In India, same. It's just the amount of people wandering in because they've got a sniffle. Australia's way down the list, and everyone else it's either being controlled, as in the daily numbers are getting less and less. Like the UK, USA, Brazil, Spain is the same, France, in Germany, Turkey, Argentina, Russia, and Colombia. These are the top 12. But India is still exponential. It's still as much as they can do to test for it, and I think that's what the numbers are showing. They're dead. Their numbers of daily cases of deaths is now on the rise. So it's on the rise, and it's a couple of weeks slower than the numbers are rising.
Yeah, but nobody, not in the mainstream media, not on the fringes, is at all confident or would ever say that these numbers are correct. So
not correct. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So the reported deaths are only hospital deaths.
Yeah. So at the moment, it's just shy of 15,000 a day.
That's conservative figure, correct?
That's a cleanup.
And if you think about that, so I think I shared with you guys last week that statistical website. We're now, I think, 60% above normal expected fatalities, all fatalities together, compared year on year, right? So we are 60% above where we expect it to be, and that's due to COVID to a large extent. But see, the knock-on effect here is quite significant, because as these deaths are mounting and people cannot keep up with burning them, I mean, forget burying them. That's all right out the door. Right? My prediction is that soon we're going to see massive pits, because they would have to start digging them now, or continuously burning pyres like they had in the Black Plague days.
That's it.
Horrific in anyone's language, book, or experience, but that's the kind of volume we are approaching here. And these are only the official numbers. Again, the tested people are the ones we can positively say, okay, yes, you're sick.
That's
right? But how many people can get tested? Not that many.
Remember, they don't test you if you fall down in the street dead or died at home dead.
Correct. And the subset of the deceased is even smaller subset than we think, because if you were tested positive but you didn't die in the hospital, they wouldn't count you. Right? So there's the people that never get tested, but they have it and they die. Then there's the people that got tested, they know they have it, but they didn't die in hospital. Right? So the mountain of dead is much higher than we're led to believe, which is a horrific thing in and of itself. But Dave, I need to mention this because it just came to my attention now. This is an article that's 5 hours old. Okay.
Yeah. Which one's this one?
Oh, this is.
Did I send it to you?
It's 𝐫𝐞𝐯𝐶𝐳. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, that's the one I sent you.
Oh, is it the one you sent through?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm putting that on the screen.
Oh, great. Thanks, buddy. So this is really that's the COVID-sparked fungal infection. That's the one, right? Times of India. This is from the BBC. Essentially, this is a patient that had recovered from COVID-19 3 weeks ago. She goes to the doctor, and he inserts a tube in her nose, and prepping for surgery and removing tissues infected with mucormycosis. It's a rare but dangerous fungal infection. This aggressive infection affects the nose, eye, and sometimes the brain. After his colleague finished, Dr. Nair, who's the doctor operating here, Akshay Nair, he's a Mumbai-based eye surgeon, sets out a 3-hour procedure to remove the patient's eye. I will be removing her eye to save her life. That's how this disease works, Dr. Nair tells the reporter. Even as a deadly second wave of COVID-19 ravages India, doctors are now reporting a rash of cases involving a rare infection. Not so rare anymore, also called the black fungus, among recovering and recovered COVID-19 patients. It's what it is. It's a rare infection. It is caused by exposure to mucor, mold, which is commonly found in soil, plants, manure, and decaying fruits and vegetables. It is ubiquitous and found in soil and air, and even in the nose and mucus of healthy people, says Dr. Nair. It affects the sinuses, the brain, and the lungs, and can be life-threatening in diabetic or severely immunocompromised individuals, such as cancer patients.
Right there.
Or people with HIV/AIDS and now COVID-19.
All right. So one of the things that the epidemiologist spoke about, Mekki, was you can be vaccinated against the virus, SARS-CoV-2, and then your body is incapable of fighting regular infection. Now, the story that I sent you has a fellow who required that his whole upper jaw was removed to arrest the spread of the fungus to the brain.
The mortality rate for this infection, mucormycosis, is 50%.
That's right.
50%. That's now, and they believe now it's been triggered by the use of steroids, which is a life-saving treatment for severe and critically ill COVID-19 patients.
Oh my goodness.
I know, right? So what happens is the steroids reduce inflammation in the lungs for COVID-19 and appear to help stop some of the damage that can happen when the body's immune system goes into the overdrive. We talked about that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I think it's a cytokine storm.
Yeah.
Or cytostorm.
The cytokine.
Yeah, that's it. But they also reduce immunity and push up blood sugar levels in both diabetics and non-diabetic COVID-19 patients. Now, it's thought that this drop in immunity could be triggering these cases of mucormycosis.
Oh, so that's only thought.
But we don't know for sure.
That's right.
Because it just, it just started happening. But this is a disease that just keeps on giving, isn't it? It's
got good value.
Oh,
sorry.
Didn't I tell you?
It's got good value.
Bang for buck. Bang for buck, right?
Yeah, bang for buck, like 𝐫𝐸 said, and that's why we're talking about biological weaponry. Bang for buck, it's cheaper than shell casings. It's cheaper than mobilizing people to kill people. And look, it just seems like it was a natural event. Extraordinary. So, what I understood here was also 18 more patients are suffering from this in the last 2 weeks, I think it is. Then it's only one hospital. That's it.
So this is the last, so 18, 19 cases last 2 weeks. But the doctor here says that he's only seen no more than 10 cases in the past 2 years prior to this. Yeah. 10 cases in the past 2 years. Not like 10, like not 18, 19 in 2 weeks, right?
That's right. So it's between 100 and 200% rise in patients.
Yeah.
And they're all suffering as a correlation at the moment, either having had the virus or had the vaccine.
We don't know what this thing is going to do, how it's going to express itself. We don't know how the vaccines, Dave, are going to affect people in the long term. Short term, we know there's clotting. We know there's some other strange things that are happening. But we don't know. Like this is really a situation where
and this is the long COVID discussion.
And that's another thing altogether. I mean, we act still, and this at work or even when you go out in the world, people still act as though this thing isn't happening. And I find this astounding. It is happening. Something is happening, and I believe it's a thing. It's a thing that is meant to happen. It wasn't an accident. It happened. This is what the show cycle is about. If you look at the last 20 years and longer, if you will, and all the seemingly meticulous planning that went into it, not just the deaths of the microbiologists, no, but having like test runs, if you will, right, of different Ebola.
And the original SARS.
Yeah, original SARS, exactly. MERS, SARS, all of those, right? All these test cases, but Ebola especially, again, and certainly the plague back in China where they sealed off a town, These are all, in my book, and then TB, of course. In my book, these are things that point to a long-term considered strategy, to an effort that has been underway for some time. The planning stages are now done. We are now in it. Initially, I thought, it's still planning, but then this thing just took a turn for the worse, and it's just getting worse every day. And just to be clear, I was listening to this really upsets me, Dave. I was listening to the news yesterday. I think I was watching a program, and they said, we got people coming in, they're fully vaccinated.
I was going to bring this up, yeah.
But they're still getting sick.
How was that? That was on the ABC.
Yeah, exactly. How's that possible? The sooner we get to herd immunity, the better. And the
facepalm
interviewer, and they go, no, there's no herd immunity. I wanted to shout at the TV. Put me on. I'll tell you what it is. But there's still this false hope, or maybe misunderstanding, or whatever it might be, that there will be herd immunity. This thing doesn't doesn't allow herd immunity. Manaus is the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, but the best case to see that herd immunity just never arises. And vaccines will not protect you from being a carrier or being infected. Sure, you might not get as sick, and that's great. That's awesome, right? I mean, the whole sales. Go on.
So, I said this on 2 official posts, one from a politician about the vaccine, and the other one was on the news article.
I thought there was a click in the line.
Yeah. So I mentioned these same points. I said they just reduce the severity for you. That's it. But nowhere in the documentation from the manufacturers of the vaccine does it say that it stops you getting the virus, and it doesn't say that it stops you from spreading it. And this is that whole herd immunity thing. It's not polio, right? It isn't a the measles, where you can become vaccinated for that and you don't get measles as a result. It isn't polio, where you don't get polio. Yeah? It is just something that's got to be around with us for the rest of humanity, unless we make it run out of hosts. And in Australia, we've done pretty well, but there's still community spread. And also I've got a gripe. Becky, you got a gripe? I'm just taking this. Now I'm standing on my soapbox. 2 weeks is insufficient amount and an insufficient amount of time for a quarantine. Maybe 21 days might be better, because
no, it has to be a month, I think.
Yeah, I'm agreeing that it's much longer than 2 weeks, because people are doing their quarantine, leaving, and then showing signs of the virus, but they didn't contract it in quarantine.
Yeah.
Because no one else has it there, and there's not on any surface. So where did they get it? Yeah, they had it all the whole time. And this is the problem. So I'm kind of starting to struggle with this, and I shout at my radio or my television quite a lot about that. This is the misinformation, because if the media are telling us we'll get to herd immunity, it's just if everyone gets the vaccine. Who told you that? What authority advised the media that that's a thing? Because I think they should they'd be first to the wall when the revolution comes. Oh, actually, no, they'd be first to run from the wild zombie mob when the revolution comes. Right? When the zombie apocalypse comes. Because right now, look, if you've got fungus on the brain and it kills you, yeah? If you've got the long COVID, we don't know what else is there. If we start to lose people when the next flu season peaks, and they've received their vaccination for the current virus, that's it. I'm back of the queue again. I keep wanting to get the vaccine, and then I realize there might be something else now. So I'm so cautious. I think I was taught to be cautious, to be honest. And I think I struggle. I got an SMS this week, Mackie. Oh, if you'd like to get the vaccine, just make contact with this number. Just call the number. Get the vaccine. Go on. It really disturbs me, Maggie. Back to you in the studio.
No, but that's the thing. I have a similar view on the vaccine. It's not something I'm going to rush into. Do I think vaccination is a good thing in general? Yes, I do. Especially if there's rigorous testing that goes on for years and years, and I'm at the end of a very long line of tests and confirmations. This thing here, though, yes, you might not have an immediate negative effect. Like the blood clot is rare. It really is. Okay, it's a rare thing, and I get that. I have no idea what the other side effects are. I don't know. No one knows. Down here, 5 years down the tracks, 10 years down, who knows? That's a bit of a worry for me. And then, in Australia, I guess we're lucky at this point, touching wood here, of course. We have been handling the this pandemic fairly well. And maybe that's maybe, I've been thinking about this, Dave, a lot.
Go on.
Maybe that's by design, because there's a couple of countries that have done well. We have done well, New Zealand have done well, and that's the tyranny of distance thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, just maybe, it was meant to be like you have these relatively safe places available, right? Just in case something goes sideways.
Predictably safe too, if you ask me.
100% for the parasites, right? Not the elite. Don't call them that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And Singapore as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Relatively safe. Again, interesting observation there. Everywhere else, not so much. Not so much. And I'm really terrified of Africa now and South America.
Well, I'm going to tell you also, from Tanzania down in the bottom 12, Tanzania, Brunei, Dominica, Grenada, Fiji, St. Kitts and Nevis, Holy See. I'd like to go there, actually, Holy See. Solomon Islands, Zand, Marshall Islands, Vanuatu, Samoa, Micronesia. How many of those are islands? Lots of them.
Oh, absolutely.
And they've all stayed really well beneath the 509 mark. That's the cutoff. Mm-hmm. That group was initially very, very large. And all of those numbers, the Taiwans, the Bhutan, Laos, Antigua and Barbuda, Mauritius, they've all started to now lift. But those guys have kept it, kept their quarantine in place, shut down travel. And you know what? I think they've done really well. I think that was the key to this. But what, Mickey, because I cut you off, what the thing that's going to happen next is all these safe countries are going to be the place that the parasitic population moves to, or is already here.
Well, both. I think both, and maybe other options as well. But certainly that's really the thing here. Australia, land size of the United States of America, thereabouts, with less than 10% of the population. Of course, massive deserts, but still you can do a lot more than we have done with the country.
Mm-hmm.
So one can see both climate as well as disease refugees ending up here. I can see massive quarantine centers built offshore on islands where the hopeful will come. The people that are the refugees. The parasites, of course, will have the red carpet treatment. They'll be invited in, or whatever the case.
They'll fly in their own planes, Mickey.
Yeah, you won't even know they're here. You won't even know that they've gotten here, right? So, just to be clear on that. But this is a disease that punishes the poor more than the wealthy. Okay, once you have it, you're sick. I get it. But the point is, if you are poor, or working poor, you cannot isolate at home. You cannot avoid going out in the world to make a crust. You must go out there and expose yourself, okay? If you live in a slum, if you live in a street, how do you isolate yourself? You cannot. In a slum, there's no isolation. People are literally living on top of each other in India, in these slums. That's why India was always my greatest worry when it came to this, or any kind of disease for that matter. Whenever there was like a whisper of something happening, I thought, oh my God, I hope it doesn't get to India. And now it has.
Yeah.
And it's gone to town.
It will soon overtake the US. And at the moment, there is only 11 million in between. Next week, and you're thinking about 400,000 per day, it's going to get closer and closer and eventually beat. So there's a graph, Mickey. I've got a graph. We've almost burnt the whole hour.
I know, right?
Yeah, so if there's the people on YouTube will be able to see this, and I'm circling the little plot for India. It's going vertical, and America is tapering off on my graph, and you'll note eventually that India will be winning the medal tally. I have to joke to myself, Mackie, because in the other pandemics, people took it seriously. I know you mentioned this already. My greatest concern is that we've placed personal liberty above safety.
Yeah.
That's number one. That's the first fault of us. But number two is we now, there's I think from the other side, not us personally, but from the government side down, they've put themselves into a position where they're 100% sponsored by vaccine companies, by big pharma and big coal or big energy, however you want to call it. In that they've outsourced their intelligence. They don't have the ability to choose, to make a decision. And I think if the salespeople selling 7.7 billion, the race to sell that many anyway, vaccines to the world, has been so strong, and we've begged for a vaccine that they could just give us anything at this point. They could sell us anything and we would buy it because we're desperate. That's the seller's market, not the buyer's market. Our choices are extremely limited. And the media is presenting this problem with clotting locally only. And the clotting is now, happening with a number of the virus vaccines. And we're not hearing about the others here because we have a predominance of the AZ vaccine. And we're only talking about that here. But in America, it's the Pfizer vaccine that they're talking about the clotting with.
Right. And I think it's the nature of the virus which leads, in our opinion, which leads to these clotting negative side effects.
I think so too. I'm not saying the vaccines are bad, right? But we also don't have a test to see why it's those people, the one in 200,000, that are having the clotting events. We're not talking about that. We know that the virus does that anyway. Right. So, yeah, look at this. At the moment, I think, look, you have to use your best judgment. If it's right for you, then good for you, is what I say.
There's one other thing we need to mention here very quickly, which is the situation in China, or with China, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to get worried about China until they stop Australian pork imports. When China stops buying Australian pork, I'm going to start digging into the earth. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. Until then, it's all posturing rhetoric. Will they march into Taiwan? Honestly, I don't care. Well, no, that's too harsh. I do care, but it's an internal Chinese affair.
I heard, Mackie, that there would be there'd be high numbers of losses, not just on one side but both sides, and it would come at the wrong time.
Oh, completely.
For China's growth. They would probably want to not do it. So if they do it tomorrow and I'm wrong, great. I'd love to be wrong on more war. But the words are that Mackie said, and it is theirs. It's going to be theirs. And should the West stop it? I think there's interests, Mackie, around the world of silicon chip manufacturing that may very well encourage the West to want to intervene.
Potentially, but there was some. I mean, they've diversified that since the massive shortage a few years ago. The thing is this, though.
We're undergoing a shortage right now as well.
But any outside intervention would be in a legal war under UN conventions, right? It just would be, because both Hong Kong and Taiwan are internal Chinese affairs. Like if China were to annex Kashmir or go across the border into India, that's a different story, right? That's a different country. But Taiwan, by the UN too, is considered part of China, and Hong Kong. It actually is part of China, completely part of China now, right after the British handed it back. So there's no grayness here. There's no legal gray area. It's very clear. It's very clear cut. it's like saying Texas. Oh, you know what, Texas? I don't really like the United States anymore. I'm just going my own way. That's not going to happen in a hurry. But if it were to happen, that would be the situation or an equivalent of the situation of what happened between Formosa, which is now called Taiwan, and China back in the 1940s. That's like Formosa. Chiang Kai-shek took his Kuomintang and said, "Nah, we're here now." And because China was weak, make no mistake, internally weak, and it had to bridge 200 years of development in decades, which they did, similar to Russia.
And Dubai.
Exactly. And don't forget that when Hong Kong was handed back to the Chinese back in 1996, was it 97 thereabouts? Hong Kong represented 30% of Chinese GDP. 30%. Okay. Now it's a fraction of a percent. China has grown leaps and bounds over the last few decades. And it's asserting itself, it's an internal Chinese matter. It's no one's business, really. The Uyghur situation is different, again, because it's a different ethnic group, and what goes on there, I don't know. Is it ethnic cleansing? Is it not? I don't have enough information. It's possible, of course it's possible, because people are people, right? That's the greatest, that's the most damning statement that you could make. People are people, okay? Because they are, and they will just be people, and if ethnic cleansing is what's on the order of the day, then it'll happen. It has happened for thousands of years, and it's going to keep on happening. If we want to stop it, okay, then we have to do something about it. But the point is, it's an internal Chinese affair at this point. Any outside interference would be extremely difficult. But we're seeing it now that the Australian government is re-examining its stance on some of the agreements that the states in Australia have reached with China. Victoria was one where it started. The Road and Belts Initiative, right? Or Bell and Roads, Road and Belt, whatever it's called.
Belt and Road.
That's it.
Because you know what? You can tighten the belt, Mackie.
That's it. The port of Darwin, right up in northern Australia, like right up top, was given, pretty much to China. Yeah, they have complete control over the port from a strategic point of view. Now the Australian government is saying, that's maybe not a good idea.
Yeah, that's right, because it's next to a military installation.
Yeah, but it was never a good idea.
It was, yeah, that's right.
And the guy who brokered the deal for the Northern Territory government is now working for that port authority for the Chinese.
Of course they are.
No, there was no graft. Everything above board. Come on, okay?
No, it wasn't. That's
Come
right.
on.
Hey, Mackie, just one thing about China. Their Chinese rocket, the Long March rocket,
yes.
second stage, or the booster rocket, I should say. I want to say it correctly. Did return. It returned without incident, although there was millions of YouTube channels sprung up out of nowhere, and it gained 17,000 new subscribers watching this debris. The thing that happened was that it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. It gained access to that at about the Maldives and plopped into the Indian Ocean. So at the moment, there isn't anything further on that. That seems to be it. And NASA was, I think, all of the world were tracking it because it was going to make a pass over Australia, but it seemed to drop just a little earlier. But making an uncontrolled re-entry vehicle, I think, is sort of frowned upon at the moment. So there's the music. This is Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out. This is the end of the first hour. We're going to close this YouTube down and make a brand new one for the show title. All right. It's only a short break. See you after the break.